What's up guys, it's Cobalt here and welcome back to another video. This past weekend I attended LPS CON. Yes, the same LPS CON that was previously in Vegas, which now this year has been held in San Diego. And my main intention was to find out if they have really improved, or at least made any sort of effort to improve, since the disaster that was 2024. And because I attended the event in 2024 and live pretty close to San Diego, I figured that I would take one for the team, so to speak, and try my hand at some investigative journalism. So fair warning, this video is definitely going to be on the longer side, but I really did want to make it as informative as possible. Obviously, I am going to be going through a little bit of backstory in case you don't know what went down in 2024. I'm going to be doing a lot of comparing and contrasting and talking about my specific experience, and then I was also able to get some testimonies and reviews from a lot of other people who went as well, which I think is going to be really helpful because obviously I can't be the only one with an opinion here. But anyways, LPS CON has always sort of been like the largest Littlest Pet Shop centric convention that started off as a very small meetup and then became a large scale thing with hundreds of people attending. It was held in Las Vegas, Nevada every year, and while I don't actually know off the top of my head when the event started, 2024 seemed like it had been the final year for LPS CON. And personally, I had only ever experienced 2023 and 2024, so I don't have a whole history to go off of, but I do have those two that I can easily compare. The issue with 2024 compared to any other events that had happened before was that it was very poorly organized and managed. There were no proper accommodations given to us guests who had paid for our tickets to be there and had also paid for the travel to be in this area and enjoy this convention. It was extremely chaotic and disorganized, and of course the heat of Las Vegas on top of that just made it kind of a really miserable experience for everybody. I do have a video already up on my channel directly after that event that goes into my thoughts when they were fresh in my mind, and I would also highly recommend going to check out Lula Loopsy's video. She was not actually an attendee, but she gathered a lot of information from people who went, and I think that it is a very well thought out and well documented video. But anyways, after a lot of people in the community came out with their own stories of 2024, their negative experiences, and then even some negative experience that they had with the convention and the hosts in the past, the hosts responded extremely poorly. Essentially, instead of taking this constructive criticism and feedback like a normal person, they kind of tried to guilt trip everybody and make it seem like we were forcing them into hurting themselves, which is a super weird response. But then of course they took down that statement and just kind of ignored everything. There was radio silence for a while, and towards the end of 2025 there was some talk about them hosting a 2025 event, but obviously that didn't happen until one day I was scrolling Instagram and suddenly got an ad for 2026 LPS CON happening in San Diego. I also made a video recently within the past month when I announced that I would be going to this convention, and I sort of was talking a little bit about this rebrand that they had started doing on their Instagram account. Pretty much completely changing their logo and a lot of the overall graphic design of the account and the website page. So honestly, not only was I super curious about how this convention was actually going to go and how it was going to be run, but I was also really curious to see if the original host was still involved at all. And I do actually have the answers to all of those things, but now that I've kind of gotten like the backstory out of the way, we can actually talk about how 2026 went for me, what I observed, and how those questions sort of will tie in later on. So unlike previous years of LPS CON, this time it was actually a 3-day event. I know at some past LPS CONs it had been 2 days, I believe, but this time it was a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And at least according to the website and the ticket, the address for the convention was at a hotel in San Diego. There was no other indication on the ticket or the website where in the hotel it was being held, which to me already seemed like a little bit of a rocky start. Again, it literally just had the address, and I'll get to this in a minute, but I kind of found the actual location completely by accident. So to properly do my investigation, and again, because I feel like I live close enough, I decided to go with the 3-day pass so that I could actually see what went on all 3 days and kind of experience like the differences in each. Because with like an actual convention, Saturday is always usually the busiest day, you know, the first and the last days are a little bit more chill. And I'm going to tell you right now, I would not consider LPS CON like a typical convention, at least in my experience. I mean, the conventions that I've gone to are Comic-Con, and that's what I picture when I think of like a convention or like an anime con or something like that. LPS CON, even when it was at its biggest, is definitely a lot more of a meetup, and this one specifically felt like a very small to medium scale meetup. I'm just going to tell you right now, like this event seemed like the complete opposite of what 2024 was, which was like very weird to see as somebody who would experience that. But anyways, on the website it tells you that the times for all 3 days was noon to 6 p.m. For whatever reason, the times are not listed on anybody's tickets either, so I actually had a lot of people coming to me asking me what time the convention was starting, and I don't blame them because the actual LPS CON website is also like very difficult to navigate, and I feel like there's no information at all because this had also been my first time like driving driving to the event. Usually it's far enough away where I stay at a hotel and then I take an Uber to the con. This one I was driving from my house in my own car, so I was like, okay, well, where am I gonna park? No information on the website or on the ticket about parking. I had no idea if parking was gonna be free or if I would have to pay for it, because looking up on the hotel's website, their parking obviously costs money because it is a hotel. So I actually reached out to LPS Con and tried to email them asking about parking, and this is what led to the email that I received a day or two before. I'm gonna guess that they sent this email because of me, and this is actually a mass email that they sent to everybody who's a ticket holder. I just think that's kind of funny. But anyways, I'm going to read that because, again, this made me a little bit like unsure before I actually got there. So the email says, please note that parking on site does cost money. There is also street parking available nearby, as well as a public parking lot with a short walk from the venue. We recommend bringing both card and cash for vendors, as payment options may vary. And then a few additional reminders: outside food is not permitted at the venue. There will also be water stations available on site, and there are restaurants at the venue where you can purchase food. If you need any accommodations, please email us ahead of the event and we will do our best to assist you. So even with the email, there was no actual directions to this public parking lot or like a map or anything. And again, no indication of where in the hotel space the venue actually was. So my friend and I, who I was going with on the first day, we found a parking lot that we assumed was free, drove there. Luckily it was free and our cars were totally fine to park there the whole day. And all of the street parking near that parking lot also seemed completely fine as well. And so we were like, okay, let's kind of walk to this hotel because this is off to the side. So we cross the road and there's not really a sidewalk, so we go up like these little steps upstairs. And lo and behold, this is where the venue happens to be. It's sort of like a little temporary pop-up tent. That's kind of a weird way to describe it. I'm not exactly sure what type of structure this would be, but at least on the hotel property, I do think that it's kind of like a permanent thing, but it is something that can be like collapsible and put away if they want to open up that space. And periodically, as I'm discussing everything in this video, I will be putting up some of the footage that I got so you can actually see what I'm talking about. I'll include some photos as well. Obviously, this time I'm not really vlogging. It was more of just documentation to go along with this video as sort of a visual aid. So again, we found the venue completely by accident. There's also not really any signage indicating where the event was. Again, there was just sort of a little sign out front of some of the doors that said LPS Con. Again, very small. Obviously though, since this is on hotel property, I'm sure the hotel has actual rules for this, so I'm not fully going to fault LPS Con on that. I just thought that it was really weird that they weren't more informative on where everything actually was, because I assume people who came from the opposite end near where the hotel building actually was, they probably had a much harder time figuring out where the venue was, because this was kind of like on the lot of the hotel near where like their pool would be on the ground floor, if that makes sense. If you can kind of picture like a layout of a hotel. Honestly, I'll even draw up a little map right here where you can see where like the parking was that I parked in, and then where the venue was, and then where the hotel was. I don't really know like how much this hotel costs or anything, but I do think that it is kind of convenient that it's like held right near a hotel. So if you were traveling from far away, you'd be like, all right, this is the hotel that I'm staying at because the convention is right here, assuming that the hotel is like in your price range and whatever. But the other main thing that I wanted to talk about in regards to this email was the whole outside food is not permitted at the venue, and then their whole deal about water stations, because those were two major issues from 2024 as well. So outside food not being permitted at the venue, I completely understand that this is, again, most likely something required by the actual venue itself, especially when it comes to like cleanup and stuff. You don't want to be leaving like random food all over the space, but I did still find that like a little weird. Like you can't just like bring in a snack or anything, come on. Although I did later speak to some people who did have like dietary restrictions or special dietary needs or like allergies and stuff, and because they contacted LPS Con staff, they were able to bring their own food. Whereas in 2024, people who tried to do that were not allowed to bring in their food, and yet there were other people who, for whatever reason, snuck food in, and they were an exception. But somebody that I knew who literally had diabetes and needed to, you know, have like a little sugary snack every now and again for their blood sugar wasn't able to do that. And then back to the water. In 2024, that was like one of the main things, because it's so hot in Vegas. Obviously, you need to be hydrated. They did not want you to bring in filled water bottles. Could bring in water bottles and fill them, I suppose. There were drinking fountains, but they were hard to navigate to because of how crowded the space was. It was very hard to get from one end of the building to the other. And I accidentally discovered that upstairs, where not everybody was allowed to go because you needed like a special ticket, upstairs there was just random free water bottles, even though they were trying to sell you water bottles downstairs and outside. That was a whole disaster. Luckily here they actually did have a water station. You can see here is my little picture of it. It's one of those like little water cooler things that you can get water from. The water was nice and cold, although by the very end of the day I did speak to some people as well who said that they thought that the water had run out. There were two of these in the building, but they should have been like more actively looking looking at them and replenishing them because I know by the second day too, it took them a little bit before they refilled it in the morning. And I almost forgot to say one more key comparison that I wanted to make. I am not sure how much the individual tickets were. I'm going to put those up on the screen now, but the ticket that I paid for was the 3-day pre-sale pass, which was $130. Again, the reason why I justified this for myself was because in 2023 and 2024, I purchased the content creator ticket, which was a ticket that allowed you to get into the event early, gave you special access to like the upstairs where they would have the panels, and also gave you the stupid little goodie bag. And that was like $124 as well. So I was like, okay, well, this is obviously giving me 3 whole days where that was giving me 1 day. I also want to be able to compare the value of both of those as well. The vendor prices I will be talking about later because that's also something that I looked into but didn't end up doing, and I will explain why towards the end of like my comparison stuff. So again, here are some actual like photos and videos of the building. On the first day, it wasn't super hot outside and it was overcast, so waiting in line was not too bad because I did end up getting there 30 minutes early. That's kind of what I ended up doing all 3 days, just so that I could like get in the line. And from the line that early on, it looked like maybe there was about 20 to 30 people. I'm not the greatest at like counting how many people are in a room, so unfortunately I can't be super accurate on that, but hopefully you can sort of tell from the video clips that I've gathered here. So waiting outside was not terrible, although somebody later on does mention that they wish there was actually shade provided, and that is something that I definitely noticed by the 3rd day, was that, oh, it's a lot hotter today, there's no shade, I am getting a little bit sweaty standing out here. But luckily inside there was actually air conditioning. That was another thing that 2024 messed up on. Their AC either didn't work at all or was like so weak that it didn't even matter because there were so many people in the room and it was so hot outside you couldn't feel it at all. This actually had like active AC that I felt cooled the entire building. Again, on the very first day on Friday, in the beginning of the day, it was starting to feel a little bit stuffy, but then I felt like the AC kick on later. And on the 3rd day, I was sitting like right next to the AC, or like at least in the path of it, so I was getting all that air blowing on me, and I actually started to get kind of cold just from the position that I was sitting in, which is kind of funny. Obviously I would choose that over being hot, but again, that just goes to show you like how much of a 180 this was from 2024. Okay, so I want to show you just a few more general clips of the space. Hopefully you can see the size of this area. It again was much smaller than the places LPS Con has been in the past, and it's also smaller that the venue LPS Expo in Chicago had last year and is going to have this year. And I would say it's generally smaller than like a standard size school gym. On the ceiling there were all these fancy chandeliers which were lighting, and then you got a lot of natural light from all of the windows outside, although obviously with those windows everybody can like kind of see into the space if they're outside and not actually part of the event. One of the lights also started flickering by the end of the first day and was flickering the continuous 2 days. Again, that's not really like an LPS Con or LPS Con staff issue, that's a venue issue, but I did still just want to bring that up. Okay, so after we lined up and it officially hit noon, that is when they finally started allowing people to come in and to scan their tickets. Again, here's what my ticket looked like. I did crop out a few things from this screenshot. There's also a barcode on the bottom that I obviously assumed they would need to scan. On the first day, however, at least when I got there, because I did get there quite early, they actually did not scan the barcode, and this is also something that you're gonna see pointed out in like the testimonies that I got from other people at the end. But they didn't actually scan the barcode. They just asked for people's first and last names that they had used to sign up with the tickets, and I guess that was good enough. They also did not give us like a lanyard or anything. I don't expect every Little's Pet Shop convention or meetup to do this, but that was something that LPS Con had done in the past, something that I personally really liked because it's fun to have like a little lanyard with your ticket on it. But no, there was none of that or really any sort of indication that you were like part of this event other than the fact that you had your ticket with the QR code on it. They didn't give you a stamp to go in and out. They didn't give you a wristband, just nothing like that. And again, I will be elaborating on some thoughts about that in a second as well. The other major thing that I noticed on day 1 was that there was only 2 vendors. Both of these vendors were there all 3 days. One of them was a pretty major like Little's Pet Shop reseller store, so they had a lot of pets that they were selling, most of which I did think were pretty overpriced. Unfortunately, that is just kind of like the reality of buying LPS right now, especially like G2 stuff. But they even had like some stuff from the generations that people don't really care about, or even mini LPS, where I'm like, why are you pricing this? Like this mini LPS, I'm like, why are you pricing this for $3? And there was also like a G3 Dolphin that supposedly was from a blind bag, and I guess that was their justification from this, but they priced it at $30. I don't think I got a photo or a video of that, but I was like, this is like weird. I understand like pricing a short hair cat like super high because whatever, but this G3 Dolphin, why is it $30? I can't get over that, I'm sorry. And then the other vendor was not actually LPS related at all. It seemed like some kind of independent artists that focused on making like their own original little clay like sculptures or like pets and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I didn't get any of their info, but as I will be talking a little bit more about vendors later, I am gonna guess that this vending experience probably wasn't worth it for them. For the LPS reseller, absolutely. There was an insanely long line for their booth the entirety of all 3 days. Like, they really did not have a break. Everybody wanted to buy something. Everybody wanted to look in there. I mean, I even bought a lot of things from them as well because they had some decent stuff, which, by the way, on Sunday I will be posting my haul video, so you should definitely come back and check that out. And also, again, because I was one of the first person to enter on Friday, I was like, wow, there's nobody here. It honestly looked like kind of pathetic because there was just all of these empty tables in this room, and at that point there was only like 10 people, and I was like, okay, I don't really know what I was expecting, but this is like even less than I was expecting because I was already expecting a low amount of people. I didn't really know anybody who was gonna be there. Luckily, on Friday and Saturday I did have a friend with me, but on Sunday I was just kind of like, you know, hanging out by myself, but also chatting with people that I've met on the other 2 days. But I will admit it was a little more boring not actually being with somebody who was a close friend of mine. It didn't have the same energy as the other 2 days, but that's kind of just like a personal thing. But once we were an hour or two into Friday, there was definitely a lot more people. I was like, okay, this is like more reasonable for a meetup. This is cool. But never at any point on all 3 days did it feel crowded. There were always a few other empty tables. None of the tables were completely full, and you still felt like you had a general amount of like breathing room and space to like walk around, maybe go off to the side and like be by yourself a little bit. And if you wanted to, you could also step outside, and the weather wasn't too bad, so you kind of just chill out there as well. Something that I actually did really like is that at the start of all 3 days, there was kind of like an itinerary that they went over, so sort of like a schedule. I believe this is a photo from day 2, so you can see 12 to 1 was check-in, 2:30 was a giveaway, 3 was a Kahoot, 4 they had the fashion show, and at 5 they had a custom contest, and then obviously at 6 that's the end. So it was cool that they could have that at the beginning of every day, so you kind of knew what to expect because there was nothing anywhere else that really gave you that indication of what was actually going to be going on here. Because again, previous years of LPS Con and even other LPS events as well, they will do sort of like major activities like that throughout the day, so you can participate if you want or just like sit back and watch while they do things like that. You can see obviously one of those things that I mentioned there was a giveaway. That was another big point of contention for 2024, was the fact that you had to pay to enter the giveaways or raffles that they were having, and people realized that that also seemed a little bit scammy because they were actually keeping all the money and not donating it, and I believe that goes against some sort of Nevada law. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not gonna bother looking that up, but that was something a lot of people were saying. So for this event, an entry to the giveaway was included with your ticket, so you didn't have to pay extra or anything like that. Their prizes were like okay. They were giving away 1 Comic-Con dragon, which is cool, but everything else they were giving away just kind of seemed a little bit lame. Like there was a new inbox G5 set, which, you know, that's cool, and then I think everything else was just like sort of random LPS. The first 2 days they did 3 giveaway winners, and on Sunday they only did 2 winners. And during this sort of like check-in schedule thing, they also let people know where food was and where the bathroom was. Although I don't actually know if anybody went to get food. I think the food on property that was mentioned in the original email and that they were talking about is just like food from the hotel. Like if the hotel had their own sort of food truck area by the pool, I think that's all it was, but I never actually figured out where that was or really checked it out. The bathroom, on the other hand, was like close, obviously, so that was fine, but you had to exit the actual venue space that LPS Con was being hosted in and go like 5 feet away to the building right behind it, and in there was the bathroom. So like that's fine. It was easy to get to, easy to figure out where it was, seemed accessible. I mean, I overheard people saying that they would have to rescan your code to re-enter after you had exited to go to the bathroom. That never happened to me. I mean, I feel like in this space especially, I do feel like a pretty recognizable person, just like as a dude with a beard or whatever. But yeah, they never like rechecked me when I was going in and out. Like they just didn't really seem to care, and I feel like that is a little bit of a safety issue. They should definitely give you like a hand stamp or something so that they can verify that yes, you are part of this convention, you can come back inside. Obviously it would be preferred if the bathroom was actually within the space that the convention is and not in like a separate building where you kind of have to exit and go to it. But again, based on the constraints of this specific venue, that makes perfect sense to me. I just thought that they should have been like a little bit more diligent on how they were handling that, because at that point any random person could have just walked right in. There was still like somebody kind of doing security right by the door, so if they really saw somebody that they hadn't seen all day and seemed suspicious, they could have stopped them. But again, just wanted to point that out. On Saturday and Sunday they did actually end up scanning the QR code tickets, so I'm not really sure why they didn't on the first day. It could have just been that they weren't scanning the first few people and then they were like, oh, I should probably start scanning the QR codes. I don't know. That was just just something else that I had noticed. But I think the final major thing that I wanted to talk about, just purely based on day one, was a question that I think all of us are the most curious to know the answer to, and that is the original host of LPS CON still hosting this one? And this is actually a complicated answer, but based on what I had just seen on Friday, the answer seemed like it was no. She was nowhere to be seen. None of her family members were anywhere to be seen. I was just seeing a bunch of random white people that I had never seen in my life. So the person hosting the San Diego LPS CON event is named Grayson. They're represented by this LPS chameleon.
Hello everybody, I am Grayson, and no, I am not a robot. No, I am not some AI generated creature. I am one of the LPS CON team members. If you don't know, our founder's been making LPS videos since 2012, and in 2016, at just 13 years old, she hosted the first LPS CON in a hot park with zero shade and only 16 people showed up.
That's an Instagram reel that has been up on the LPS CON account for like half a year to a year at this point, and everybody was like, who is this Grayson person? Because there's nothing to indicate that they're really a member of the LPS community outside of this, or anything that makes it seem like they're really into LPS. I don't know, like I just don't get those vibes, and I also didn't really get those vibes from them in person. I'm going to be referring to them with they them pronouns because I don't actually know what their pronouns are. I just know that, at least to me, they seem like a fab but mask presenting person, which I point out purely for the fact that like, oh, that's cool that somebody who seems like at least somewhat queer is representing like the convention. I don't know, just wanted to point that out because that is something that I actually did really appreciate about the previous host, not like the queer part because I don't think that she is, but the fact that she's a black person, so obviously like seeing a person of color hugely representing the community in this way is probably like extremely impactful for other people in the community, because obviously I feel like the community is honestly pretty dominated by white people, because I feel like a lot of the LPS community is very dominated by white people. I mean, the fact that like you can, you know, see everybody's fingers in half the videos that they make, you can kind of see that, and it is nice to again like have people of color more reflected in this community and to have a bigger voice within it as well. But anyways, yeah, had no idea who these people are. I do have a little bit more info that again I'll share when I get to like the testimony stuff, but I just wanted to point that out as well, that at least front facing it did not seem like the previous host was involved at all anymore, although in the back of my mind I kind of always still have had the assumption that she was, you know, doing something to sort of like manage behind the scenes, whether that was through like social media or funding or helping to set up but not actually being there physically, because again I was really wondering, why is it suddenly in San Diego and no longer in Las Vegas? But general vibes from the convention, I thought it was good. Like I got good vibes from it. Again, extremely chill. Like I feel like chill is the best way that I can describe it, because at past events that I've been to, even LPS Expo, which I really enjoyed and I'm very excited for this year, you guys should pull up, as somebody who is like, you know, actively selling stuff and is kind of like, I don't know, somebody that people want to meet, I guess. Like I feel very busy and I never really have time to like just hang out and like actually trade. This time I traded so many LPS. Like I have a crazy haul that I'm so excited to show you guys, but I feel like that just kind of like shows how much breathing space that I had, and like I was actually able to kind of go around, and because it was like such a small room as well, I felt like I could comfortably leave my stuff kind of out on my table and I could go to a different table on the other side of the room and still really easily be able to keep an eye on my stuff. Wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that, like you should keep your things with you if you don't want them to get stolen, but I just felt pretty reassured that I could keep an eye on my stuff and like rush over there really fast, because again, the size of the space, and I did not feel like there was an issue with overcrowding. Obviously, if more tickets were sold, they would definitely have needed a bigger venue space. Unfortunately, I don't know how many tickets are sold. I really wish that I knew the number, but for one individual day, I did not think that there was more than 100 people there. Again, I don't really have a very accurate eye to seeing how many people are in a space, but I would guesstimate like 50? I don't know, it definitely didn't seem big enough for it to be 100. So I think that's great for a lot of people who really don't like the larger space with a bunch of people. Like an actual convention space, that would be a nightmare to somebody with like all these people walking around and it being super crowded. I don't think they would have had this issue here at all. Oh yeah, and about the music, because in 2024 they were like blasting music from the speakers and it was so like crowded and crazy, and then on top of that, because of the music, you could not hear anything that anybody was saying. There was still music playing, but it was low enough where you could just kind of like tune it out in the background, and it was just white noise at that point, and you could very like clearly, you know, just hang out with people and talk at a normal volume instead of trying to yell over anybody. So all of the major things like that I think were were kind of the downfall of 2024 were definitely improved upon here in 2026. They had at least like made sure to touch on all of those points and correct them, although I do definitely still think that it is necessary to issue a legitimate apology to the community still, even though it's been like 2 years, because the way that they tried to handle it in the beginning was just, you know, kind of like trying to double down on everything. It made it even worse. And even if they did try to correct that and re-apologize, they kind of still need to apologize for the things that they said to us in the beginning, because at that point, like, it just didn't seem like they cared about the community at all and seemed like they were much more interested in purely making a profit than actually putting on this event to bring LPS collectors together. I didn't really get like a money hungry vibe from this or anything that went on with 2026, but I also didn't necessarily get the vibe that they were like super into the LPS community. Like, I don't know, I just never got the vibe that Grayson is actually a part of the community, which is fine. Like, you don't necessarily have to be, but it definitely makes it like more of like an intimate experience and something that's like personal and really, you know, makes you feel welcome and accepted because you want to be a part of this community that everybody is sharing together. But again, not necessarily a bad thing, just something that I noticed, mostly based on vibes. I don't have anything too notable to say about Saturday and Sunday that were particularly different than Friday, because again, Friday was my very first impression, and all of the impressions that I got from that day stayed pretty consistent through the other 2 days. Obviously, as it tends to be with any convention, Saturday was the busiest day, but I still didn't feel like it ever got overcrowded to a certain point. I honestly think that it kind of helped that the one main reseller vendor had like such a long line the whole time, because that meant that like half the people were just waiting in line, and it again helped to open up the space, which I don't know, kind of funny. On Saturday, there were also actually a lot more vendors. We still had the 2 from Friday, because again, they were vendors that were going to be there all 3 days, and I still don't know the exact number, but there were at least 4 other vendors there on Saturday, so for a total of 6, which I think was a pretty good number, especially for the space. And for the space as well, I still think that like the vendors were laid out well, that it didn't really overcrowd everything else or take away from the space for the tables for normal guests to sit at. I think line organization could have been a little bit better, because it did get a little bit crazy over there at points when people were trying to buy things, but ultimately it was decent. And then on Sunday, we went back to just having the 2 vendors, I believe. So again, the ones that were there all 3 days. And Sunday, of course, was the most chill day, because most people that I knew who had gotten like a multi-day ticket actually only purchased Friday and Saturday, which I probably would have done if I were going to like redo this experience without worrying about all the stuff that I'm saying for this video specifically, because Sunday, again, less people, a little bit less things going on the like itinerary, I suppose. And at that point, I feel like people had kind of experienced everything that the convention had to offer. There were still some people on Sunday where Sunday was actually the only day that they were attending, so that was nice to see those people as well. And again, I do like the fact that it was 3 days, so you can kind of give people like an option to choose from. And in my mind, Saturday was the best day, but if you're somebody who kind of wants like the least amount of people as possible, just purely for like not wanting to be in an overcrowded environment, then obviously they would probably prefer Friday or Sunday. So again, I like the fact that that was sort of an option there as well. And so because there were so few vendors and like the activities sort of established weren't the most interesting, the main thing going on here was definitely trading. Really great space for trading. People had a lot of really cool pets. Everybody was super respectful with trades, at least the ones that I interacted with. I thought it was just like a really generally great environment for trading. It was a lot of fun. And I met a lot of cool people through that as well. Lots of people that I never met, a couple of people that I have actually met before, which is cool to see them again. But yeah, definitely the highlights of this convention in general was trading and just kind of like a general hangout and like a nice vibe. So I feel like those are the main things that I specifically wanted to cover based off my own personal experience and based off of like the key things that were bad in 2024 that I really wanted to see if they had done any effort to improve upon. And I do think that they at least put in some effort, whether or not they fully accomplished that. So now we are going to dive into the testimonies that I asked for from people. Pretty much, I just put on my Instagram story, I was like, hey, if you were at LPS Con this weekend, tell me what you thought. Like I never gave them any like incentive to say something good or even to say something negative. I asked purely for like an honest review, their own personal experience. And a lot of these are from people where this was their first time at an event like this. And I think that that's also important to establish as well. But I do have, again, some things from people who had attended in 2024 and then some things from vendors as well, because there are still a few more details that I want to speak about specifically into regards from vendors. But aside from the things that I was looking out for, One of the main things that I was really curious about was going to be accessibility, especially for people who use mobility devices like a wheelchair or a cane, because again, that was an issue for 2024, and there were a lot of people actually using mobility devices at this convention, like way more than I had seen at any LPS event that I've been to before. And while obviously I can kind of like look around and get a vibe on how that is, I'm really grateful that I was actually able to speak to somebody on this and get her actual like experience, which is really great. With all these testimonies, even if I like know the person and can speak highly of them, I just decided to like block out all of the usernames and profile pictures just for consistent privacy with everybody, so I'm not like picking and choosing. And I'm gonna put all of these screenshots on the screen so you can fully read them. I'm gonna kind of like touch on key details and then say my own personal things as well. If you were somebody who wrote any of these though, you can definitely like elaborate more down below in the comments if you would like. And from what I personally noticed, like there was a ramp to kind of help get people inside. There wasn't really like stairs, or it wasn't like super elevated, but obviously there's sort of like a little lip that a ramp would have needed to be there for if somebody had a wheelchair, so I thought that was good. And like generally, to me at least, like the space inside seemed like it was spread out enough where theoretically somebody could go through in a wheelchair. Obviously though, as I'm gonna get into and as we're gonna see, I do think that this is a major thing that should have been improved on because it was not actually as accessible as it should have been. So I'm actually going to read everything that she wrote up because I think that it is very informative. For the type of wheelchair that she had, it did seem like it was kind of one of those motorized wheelchairs, and she did say that it's a fairly compact wheelchair, so this would have been even more of an issue for somebody who has like a much larger one to get around with. But anyway, she says that she let the organizers beforehand know about the wheelchair. The venue and setup weren't super well thought out for accessibility, especially considering how many other con goers I saw with mobility aids. Many of the walkways between the tables and up to the booths were only wide enough for walking through, leading others to move things out of the way for me to get through. For the booths, especially the two more popular LPS booths, I know that the setup was mostly left up to booth renters, but I think they could have done with booth organization to help make sure that there was space for wheelchairs and walkers, especially since there were so few vendors. My spouse spoke to the seller at the large booth and they let us know that it was condensed to prevent stealing that had happened on the first day of the convention. Butting in really quick, I don't really know if there was much stealing going on, and honestly the setup was definitely different between the first day and the second and third, but even on the first day, like I still don't really think it would have been all that wheelchair accessible. Getting back to what she says though, as someone who has what is considered a rather compact wheelchair, I think anybody with a more traditional electric device would have had a much more difficult time. Also, there was no signage or information offered on how to get into the line before the convention from a wheelchair accessible direction, and the ramp up to the line was in a pretty inconspicuous area. My spouse had pointed out that if I hadn't had him with me to help find it more quickly, it could have been dangerous for me looking for the ramp from the street. So yeah, like I said, there was actually no sidewalk getting from the parking lot to where the venue was. It was just kind of you cross the street and then there were like some stairs just going up. I actually didn't even see this ramp that she's talking about, so that also like would have made it difficult. Just I have no idea where it even was. And then she says, well, I'm very glad there's plenty of seating, as that is an accessibility consideration for many other conventions / events that I've been to tend to have designated tables for areas with space for mobility devices to pull up to or some other small accommodations. I'm glad I didn't have a lot of trades, as it would have been difficult for me to spread out trades at these tables like others were able to do since they weren't super wheelchair friendly. Similar issue to accessing sign-in, banner signings, and name tags. I think just a little more consideration could have made these significantly more accessible. Other accessibility concerns I noticed were that the line was only shaded for 2 to 3 attendees. Of course, this isn't Vegas, but anyone with sun/heat sensitivity could still have been affected. I got there about 20 to 25 minutes before the con started, and I was already feeling a little overheated. I feel like this wouldn't have been as much of an issue if it was just before the con, but I saw that some of the longer lines got directed out the door throughout the con, which left more people in the sun. Also, a general lack of clear signage or easy to read access scheduling presented its own accessibility issue. Yes, I 100% agree. As somebody who is like fully physically and mentally capable, that was just like a general accessibility issue for literally everybody. And then the final part of her message that she says is, I know that was all pretty negative, but I think LPS Con did do some things right. The water access was good and the venue was cool and wasn't too bright, which can be issues for a lot of disabled con goers. Announcing before scheduled events was a good touch as well. They checked bags and allowed in meds/snacks I needed to manage my own issues, so I hope that was the case for other attendees as well. They did have the issue with the flickering light, but that was more of a venue issue that could have been anything out of the organizer's control. Overall, I think that some more forethought and planning for the convention organizers could have alleviated many of the issues and made the convention easier to access for everybody. I did ask her a follow-up thing because she mentioned that the tables didn't really appear wheelchair accessible, and at least for me, like I don't really know anybody in my personal life who's in a wheelchair or have had experience with that, that. To me, like, the table looked level with a wheelchair, where it would have been like the same height for somebody sitting in a regular chair. So I did ask a follow-up for that, just like a little bit more of her personal experience with like what a wheelchair accessible table actually looks like. And so she just said that I think it's overall just awkward. The height made it so that I couldn't reach things except for at the edge of the table. So she couldn't reach to like a far end of the table because they were circular tables. And while there's rarely going to be a perfect wheelchair table, usually they're either lower so you can access the table without pulling in like you would in a seated chair, or they're high enough to pull in but you have more space to reach, like they are narrow or longer. I think I'm just comparing these to other conventions I've been to. And then she said, while the tablecloths look nice, they made it weird to pull up to the tables without yanking the tablecloths as well, which I think makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see that now after she told me that. So yeah, I completely agree that the venue wasn't really as accessible as it appeared to be. And again, I'm really, really glad that I got this insight, because this was like a key thing that I was like, okay, I need to touch on this in this video, because I was like already getting those vibes day one, but I didn't really find anybody that I could talk to until I ran into this person. So thank you so much. I super, super appreciate it. And then again, I also actually just appreciated like being able to learn more about that as well. And I think that in general, like this is just something that people should be a little bit more like aware of. Okay, so let's go through the others. Here's another person that was there for all 3 days, and they have some pros and cons. So their pros were that people were really nice considering what they had heard of from 2024. They expected to pay way higher prices for LPS, but thought that the vendors actually had some pretty good prices, although some were definitely outrageous. You got 13 LPS for 33 bucks, which is fire. It's very low energy and chill, great for people to walk around and trade. They liked that it was a small venue and that their stuff was in their site at all times. Lines were never too bad, which is nice. They also liked that you did not have to pay for a raffle entry unlike previous years, and that there was enough seating for everybody to actually sit down. And then the cons were the venue was very small and not worth the price of the ticket. It makes perfect sense for me given the fact that the 3-day ticket was 130 bucks. While I had fun, I understand that the small venue was expensive because it's right next to the bay and right on the water. The ticket price was insanely high when the con didn't have very many activities to do. What also wasn't worth the price of the ticket was that they advertised the market versus what showed up, making it seem like there would be a ton of LPS and LPS tubers attending, where in reality, there were 3 staff members and only one of them spoke just to do announcements. Obviously, like, yeah, they didn't have any special guests, which isn't necessarily like something you need for a convention like this, but it's definitely something that gets people excited and draws people in. And then it seemed like there would be a lot of vendors. Clearly, there was really only 2 for most of the days. And then they also said that there would be classes such as customizing LPS classes, but there was none of that. I was extremely disappointed to see the venue because it didn't look like it amounted to what I paid for. This is interesting because I never like saw any of this. Again, I didn't really see much actual info or advertising for the convention, so I appreciate that they pointed this out as well, because that is definitely something that could be worked out. I'm not sure if maybe like some of the info that they saw was stuff that was left over on like the website or the Instagram from previous years that obviously weren't coming back. They continue by saying, it felt like I paid $130 to basically socialize and make friends, since the con didn't exactly assemble anything and left it up to the people to give themselves something to do. Though I did see a lot of people saying that they liked the low energy vibe, it advertised itself like a Comic-Con level event and ended up feeling more like a local coffee shop LPS meetup with more people. I think that is like literally the best way to describe this, especially when compared to 2024. So it really seems like a lot of the advertising that they saw was not accurate to what it was going to be like this year, and was still reflecting stuff from previous years. And then this I also think is important. They say, as a first timer to LPS Con, I was really excited, thinking I would have the same experience that had been described years beforehand. I can see how somebody who went to 2024 would definitely appreciate this experience, but I felt like my money was wasted on the tickets. The event felt more like something that would be free to go to and not a paid experience, though I did enjoy being there and definitely would have paid to go again. My family doesn't have the money to visit a different state such as Nevada or Texas, so I'm really hoping that they show up again in San Diego next year, but this time with the same kind of energy that they had in Nevada and with a less expensive venue mostly. Overall, I really enjoyed my first experience, and it was more positive than negative. The rest are just nitpicks, but I did love the experience and would totally go again, since this was my first impression, and I can't wait to go to a regular one someday as well. I think that was some really, really great insight, especially since I never would have like noticed any of those false advertising details like they pointed out. And I feel like in a way that's kind of LPS Con still riding on their high horse and believing that they're like the biggest LPS Con out there and that like they're hot shit, when in reality they desperately need to recover from the damage that they had done to themselves. Here's another review that I got from a first timer. They say, for my first LPS Con, I was strangely underwhelmed. Based on what I've seen from previous years, the con was a lot bigger and busier with more vendors. This year, however, there was mainly only 1 to 2 LPS vendors. This caused the lines to be very long, taking up a good chunk of time. Despite this, I got to meet many lovely people who ultimately made the event very enjoyable for me. There were also tables for people to sit at and trade with other collectors. Although there was no food or water, you would have had to go to the hotel cafe. Overall, overall, I had a ton of fun, and it was a great way for me to talk to other people about my passions. Solid 5.8 out of 10. Would have scored higher for me if there were more to do than basically just the 2 things for the whole 6 hours. And this was somebody who was only there on Sunday, actually. I remember meeting them, and they made me a really adorable LPS custom. Again, watch my haul video when it comes out. But yeah, again, this is just once again reiterating on the fact that like a lot of people were under the impression that this was gonna be the LPS con and not just like this smaller meetup. And that's kind of something that I've just like always had an issue with in regards to LPS con, is it's not really like a con, it's just a big meetup, and this was like a smaller version of that in my opinion. But obviously, yeah, 2024 it was pretty crazy and like more high key like that, but this is again just the total opposite. And then they said that there was no water for them, even though there was water in there, and I definitely did end up getting water from the little water thing on Sunday. And I think maybe they arrived later, so I'm not sure if they saw like the scheduling thing in the beginning, but again, they could definitely be more clear about that by including like some signage in the venue, like, hey, there's water here, food's this way, bathrooms this way, stuff like that. Okay, this person says, my day at LPS Con yesterday was so much fun. The vibes were chill, not crazy crowded, and I traded all my collection for different pets, and I got some custom bases to work with that I just love so much. And this person was there only on Friday, so they experienced the very, very beginning. And this person says they only ever went to the controversial LPS Con of 2024, and I think this one was way less overstimulating. Honestly, as many people have said, glad for bag checks. I literally opened my bag in 2024 and they shooed me away. Glad for water. There was a fountain and free water bottles in 2024, but they were very hard to access as the fountain was behind the biggest booth and the bottles were only handed out for like 20 minutes. Again, that was in 2024. 2026 was less loud and easier to go outside. Definitely this year was better. In 2024, I wasn't even able to trade. There were like 3 people that sat at the table the whole time. That's another thing. In 2024, they had tables to sit at, but like every 15 minutes, they made people get up and go to a different table. I still can't get over that. That was crazy. Basically, just a lot of other people saying that it was chill and that they thought it was good. This person says 8.5 out of 10. Super solid and amazing. I was a little bummed that Friday had so few vendors, but that didn't end up mattering all too much to me after a while. All the con goers were very nice, and Friday was a really relaxed day, and I think a perfect one for people like me whose first time it was at LPS Con. Location was really good. Glad that it was a good open space with accessible water and everything. Here's another one. This person, I will actually mention who they are. This is from LPS Susie, who was one of the vendors on Saturday, but her message is going to give a little bit more insight into things like that. So it says, the overall experience is great. Everyone was so nice. They gave me an amazing opportunity to give me stage time for my charity auction at my table. I won the Young Entrepreneur Challenge, so my table was actually free. Here we go into more of the vendor stuff. If it was not free, I would have had to pay $400, which I think is extremely high, especially since we didn't have the big crowd at the event. So I think lowering the price for booths would be great. I like the new team and loved how chill it was. Grayson told me they tried fighting for food to be allowed. The hotel rules are very strict and expensive, so they didn't hold tight to the outside food rule. They often came over and checked on me and other vendors. I felt very welcome. Overall, great experience. So that is also a great insight to have from a vendor, because yes, the vendor tickets were $400 per day. I'm gonna look at another vendor testimony in a second, but they were also begging people to vend for free on Sunday because obviously there were not enough people for that. There were still the 2 people that paid for the 3-day ticket. You wanna know how much that 3-day vendor ticket was? It was $1,000 freaking dollars, because I was like, maybe I'll be a vendor. Nope, psych. That's actually insane. Supposedly, the vendor tickets also included like an actual selling permit, but like it still shouldn't be that much money, especially considering that they do not have the same level of hype and guest presence that the previous run of LPS Con had. There's just no way that like these people are making back their money. I'm so sure that like the LPS resellers made bank, like obviously. But the one person who I mentioned who had a 3-day vendor ticket who was selling like original artwork and stuff, like there's no way that they made back their $1,000. Like no way in hell. Yes, of course, like these prices should be lowered. I think that the actual ticket prices should be lowered as well, especially considering like what we were actually getting this year. Even though, yes, it was fun, yes, it was chill, but at the end of the day, like, was any of it still worth the price? I don't know. That's up to you guys to decide. It was fine for me, like whatever, but especially if you pay for your ticket and this whole time you're expecting like the big elaborate convention and then you don't get that, you are going to feel a little bit ripped off. And while these vendor prices could very well be accessible for somebody who has like a big store and is reselling LPS like that, it is absolutely not accessible for an individual in the community or like a kid or a small independent artist who just wants to sell their art. Like this is not accessible for that, and they are not going to be making a profit. If they do, it's going to be like $100 instead of, you know, what it could be if the vendor ticket was like $50. And again, like I don't know if part of that is maybe like specific to venue requirements, but it does partially feel like, you know, they knew they weren't going to sell enough tickets, so let's hike up the prices of the vendor tickets and see if anybody buys them. I don't know. But here's another testimony from another vendor who was very, very sweet. I also bought from her, and this is what she had to say. She says, I did get some insight into Nana's involvement, and Nana is the previous host of LPS Con. I guess she is still the official owner of the business and LLC, but Grayson, who's hosting this weekend, has taken on the role, at least for this year, of planning and hosting. They know each other through some sort of equestrian business that Nana also owns, and thought Gray would do a good job at managing it going forward. I did ask Grayson if they'd do it again next year, and they say they weren't sure as they're also in school, which needs to be prioritized. I got the vibe that they wouldn't be opposed to it, and this year went smooth, so yeah, that's all they know. Also discussed with them why the 3 days, since it spread the vendors pretty thin, and they said they would probably do 2 days for next year instead. So hey, now we know the answer to that. The original host to LPS Con, while she is no longer front facing, obviously does still own the LLC. Like, there's no way she just sold it to some random person. I do think that it's really smart of her to step back, but again, still would like that apology for everybody. Okay, I have one more testimony slash review from the buddy that I was with on Friday, and this is what he says. He says, it was a fun experience overall, and it really helped my socializing skills. I felt like it was less of a convention and more of a casual meetup. That's what I keep saying. Though I only went the first day, and there were only 2 vendors, with one being the main one that was reselling LPS with the super long line. I love that you essentially got to meet everyone in the building and see what pets they felt like bringing and how everyone was open to trade. Everyone was friendly, and I love being in an environment where we all had these shared interests and we're all essentially in the same age group, so it wasn't too uncomfortable as an older attendee. Yeah, honestly, I didn't touch on this earlier, but most people were like in their like teens and early 20s, which is really cool. There were a couple of kids, but it wasn't in like a weird way, you know, and the kids had their parents with them as well, so I thought that was totally chill. For things that could be improved, I wish it was advertised more clearly and management was more clear on the criteria of the event / shared more information on where the meetup was being held in general. Additionally, wish there was more water available. One station completely ran out by about 3-ish when my partner went to get a refill, as well as clear information where bathrooms and food would be. Again, they kind of like said this in the beginning, but if people showed up later, they would have totally missed that and would have not known where any of these things were. Also, wish the screen names you input in the system when signing up were respected, as I had to dead name myself a few times and had to risk adding myself if I were to win the raffle, though that's more of a personal issue than a big issue. But yeah, it's still really weird that when you buy the tickets, they ask you to put in like a screen username or whatever, and they just don't do anything with that. So I don't know what the point of that is. In previous years, they would print that on your like little badge thing, but they didn't do that. So like in general, that just is kind of a sucky experience that he had. One actual complaint is that I didn't like the main vendor that had the most space in the tent. Low-key felt scummy, and her prices on some pets were questionable AF. It was like getting eBay scalped, but in real life. I'd rate this a solid 3.5 out of 5 and had a decent first ever convention. Yeah, honestly, 3.5 out of 5, I think that's what I would give it as well. Very like solid, middle of the road, generally good vibes, but still things that need to and absolutely should be improved upon. Okay, oh my god, dude, I think I'm finally done talking. Yap of the century. I don't know how long this video is gonna be. I feel like it's at least gonna be 30 minutes. My throat hurts from talking for like an hour. It's been literally an hour, dude. Actually, I think it's been like an hour and a half, Jesus. But hey, I hope my first attempt at investigative journalism was good. I hope this was informational for you guys. Again, I really just wanted to like go and figure these things out, get all this footage, present all of the info that I have to you guys. Obviously, I have my own opinions. All these other people have their opinions as well, but I wanted to present all this information in a way where you could like form your own opinions and decide, hey, is LPS Con worth it to ever go check out again? It seems like it's not like 100% guaranteed that it's even going to happen again in 2027. I think where it stands for me personally, regardless of if the size remains the same as how it was this year or if it's going to expand next year, if it's in San Diego, yeah, I'm probably gonna go again because I can just drive there super easily. And it's still just like, you know, a really fun time to meet people in the community and like hang out and chill with people and trade. Like, that's the part that I love and the part that I really enjoyed about this, even though, you know, when you're kind of just there hanging out by yourself and you feel like there's nothing really to do, it gets a little bit boring once you've kind of done everything. Because yeah, 6 hours every day for 3 days, I was like, what are they filling the time with? But it also does make me happy that like these people who said that this was their first time going to one of these events, even though they were a little bit disappointed because it wasn't exactly what they expected, I am happy that they still had a good time and felt like they got to have good interactions with people and had fun with that. Like, that's pretty cool. But again, even though it's been 2 years, I still think a proper apology should be issued for 2024. Like I said in the very beginning of the video, there are a lot of videos online talking about what went down. I still think Lil Loopsy's video is the best, but if you just search up like LPS Con 2024, I'm sure you can find something. There are also a lot of really great informative Instagram posts as well. So all we can do now is hope and pray that that's not going to happen again. 2026 for LPS Con has definitely seemed kind of like they're starting over from scratch, and like they have to, honestly, because they lost a lot of that like good representation and community trust that they had built up for so long. They kind of just destroyed it, and it really was their own fault. There were so many opportunities that they had to just apologize and say they were going to work on correcting their mistakes. But again, ultimately, they doubled down and kind of tried to push the blame onto all of us, the people that paid to go to their event. I don't know, just let that sink in. But yeah, if you guys have ever been to LPS CON before, especially if you were there in 2024, and especially if you were there this year, I would love to hear more of your thoughts down below in the comments. And also, let me know if you think that they even actually did make an effort to improve. Obviously, there were those visual things that I saw where I'm like, okay, clearly they made the effort to do these things. But again, those things were accessible water. Like, that should not be that hard, and that should not be how low the bar is to actually have this be good, you know? Ultimately, though, if you went, I hope that you had a good time. And again, thank you to everybody that I met and interacted with and traded with, and like people who gave me stuff or like wanted to get a picture with me. That is literally crazy. Like, I'm literally just a random guy. Why do you want to take a photo with me? I'm happy to do it though, like for real. So yeah, come back on Sunday for my haul. The haul is absolutely fire. That's the best part of this for real. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening to me ramble, and I will see you guys all in my next video. Bye.